So while Kate gets the computer working, I'm going to give backdrops. So most everyone here has at least met me once, I think. I'm Kate Kuehn. I'm Senior Vice President in charge of the Armor. But what most people don't know is that one of my other jobs is, my favorite job maybe, is I advise young startups coming out of stealth or looking for their first funding to help them on the road to being amazing cyber companies. It's a passion of mine and something that I absolutely love to do. And Kate here is the CEO of an amazing company called Cybermaniacs. I met Kate a year ago, or actually now 2 years ago, in London at a event called White Hat Ball. Has anyone heard of White Hat Ball? It's an event for cybersecurity professionals that is a charity event to help an organization called Childline, which is a hotline that children can call when they are in trouble or need help. And the cybersecurity community comes together and raises hundreds of thousands of pounds for this awesome organization. And Kate's company was one of the sponsors, and it was the first time I had seen cyber education presented in a format like this. And I fell in love with the company. I'm not going to steal any thunder of what the format is because it's pretty rock star. And I'm really excited today to have a fireside chat to teach you guys all about Cybermaniacs, what drives Kate, and this amazing organization. And with that, I think we have a highlight reel to start, and then we'll have Kate introduce herself. Go for it.
Good day. Welcome to the Cybermaniacs news desk.
Let me hit you with the facts. Ouch! What was the high school you went to? In 2016, what was the annual cost of cybercrime to the global economy? Oh, yes, Wanda.
$450 billion.
Is that David Beckham? Hey, David! Love your work! Woohoo! Package for you, sir! Ooh, I don't remember ordering the package. How marvelous. Soon will be mine. Even for a box of chocolates?
Oh, May 29, 1987, Jimmy.
Really? 2-9, Friday 7, and... Oh, bada boom, bada bing. We're in, baby.
My name is Wanda Proxy, and I was the victim of a cyber attack.
Ended up compromising key customer information. Next time we'll know, hover. Hover, hover, hover.
Today we bring you examples of malicious links, stories of deception, lies, and deceit against good people working for good companies.
A sticky note? Are you kidding me? I mean, come on! What? Who's the one with the one with the arse choke? I did say use a VPN or a dongle to connect, didn't I? Okay, Frankie, drop the beat. Passwords are there to keep you secure from all web scary stuff without any cure. I got no trouble with passwords, you see, because I hate letting no one spy on me. Buy no more than 8 chemicals store. My password is damn good, makes it strong. My password is pass the tree. My favorite symbol boy is don't be telling me security's no good. Up in my grill, in my neighborhood. I'm a phone, I'm a web, I'm my app. I don't mess around with a short, weak pass. Work for your mother. Oh, you my mother out. This room is a
So has anyone ever seen cyber education like this? So the puppets went around White Hat Ball, and I will tell you, the reaction from the crowd, everybody, like, there were celebrities in the room, there were sports heroes, and everyone's like, no, I want a picture with the puppet. No, I want a picture with the puppet. Did you see the rap about the passwords? I've never seen a reaction to any company the way I saw a reaction to Kate's. And so I was very honored when I introduced myself and said, I'd really like to be a part of your journey. And she said, well, maybe if you're, if you help me a little bit. And with that, I'd like to introduce Kate.
Thanks, Kate. The two Kates, Fireside Chat.
So why don't you tell a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a Gemini, and
You like long walks?
long walks on the beach. So I spent most of my career, before I came into cybersecurity about 3 or 4 years ago, I was enterprise IT. So the beginning of it was, doing sales, did a stint for Gartner, unfortunately. Just kidding. A lot of what I was focused on is helping companies actually implement the change that the technology seemed to provide. And so I've spent, 20 years at the coalface trying to get pesky humans to actually adopt what we were developing, whether that was a regulation we had to roll out, whether that was an application that we had built in-house, whether that was a new vendor platform we were migrating to. So I spent 20 years working inside of companies and in the vendor space, trying to actually help the companies adopt to technology. And it was incredibly difficult. And I guess I just kept on asking the question, well, why? Why is it so hard for humans to do this? Or why is it so challenging to communicate? Or what can we do to make it better? And that kind of took me down a path of just learning about organizational culture and agile and all these other things. And I think what came together with Cybermaniacs is I actually have a theater degree. And my parents are so proud right now that I'm actually using it for the first time in 25 years. They're like, why are you getting a theater degree? I was like, I don't know, because I like the human condition and Shakespeare is fascinating and this is interesting. But then I got pulled into this world of technology because it was fascinating to see what the potential was of all this new technology that's out there. And so I guess that's just the beginning of the story, which is I do have a creative background, but I also have been actually part of IT change for 20 years. And 3 years ago, we came up with this crazy idea.
So let's talk about this crazy idea. So, as a former practitioner, I will agree that getting your staff to actually look at cyber education and get through the checks in the boxes is a painful experience. And sometimes the videos and the compliance and the security education is a bit dry. What is a cybermaniac? How did this all come about?
Well, I think what we started with was, we actually started with questions around people and attention and culture. Like that's what the first cup of coffee we had where we talked about what could we do, how could we do it, that led us down this path was, you go to cybersecurity conferences a lot. I think it's getting better in the last couple of years. There's certainly with RSA last year, there was a lot of talks around culture and how do you use it, how do you understand it. But this is 5 years ago, and there was a lot around, don't forget people, you have to train your people, they're the most important thing, and culture is key. And that would be the last slide, and then the presenter would walk out the door with no information about what it is, or how you use it, or what does it mean, or how do you measure it. And I think that's what we started with, which is we knew that was key to any organizational change we had ever done, whether that was a regulatory change, or an IT update, or whatever it was. If you don't tap into the people, they will resist you. What is it, what's the famous quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yep, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
So we knew we had to work with it, and we were trying to find better ways to do that. But I think the creative just came in because we said, employees are bored, and I've been in the corporate world enough to know what bad training looks like. And I think that it's just a question of when the technology was first. I'll give the quick version. The quick version is when LMSs first came out, and there was an ability to deliver tons of learning at scale to your whole workforce for like less than 25 cents. People were really excited about that, and they were like, great, let's throw everything into structured learning on an LMS, we can just deliver it to everybody digitally. and that's not necessarily getting the right outcomes, because the outcomes we're actually looking for, and this was part of the first conversation, is I don't want people to be able to define malware. That's not my goal. That's like 3rd grade, right? If you can pick out malware from a multiple choice thing and you can give me the definition, I haven't actually made you more cyber secure as a human being. And so we kind of started to think about, well, what should we do? How should we do it at the beginning? That is more about the people and how do we help them change instead of how do we just get a tick box.
So I love the phrase, and I've heard you say it many, many times, and we've talked about this, is this concept of beyond awareness. And you were talking about it, that it's one thing to get to the 3rd grade level of this is malware. Ransomware is a type of malware. Ransomware is bad. It will cost you money. To actually becoming a cultural part of the business, as far as understanding and the awareness that's necessary for making companies more secure. And right now in today's world, and I talked about it yesterday in my talk, with the rise in cybercrime and the types of cybercrime, it's becoming critical that companies make security part of the culture. So talk to me about beyond awareness, and if you've got an example, I'd love to show an example of one of your shorts.
It's So it's an interesting thing that when you're a vendor, I guess you could say, and you're trying to sell into a market and you're trying to sell something that has a name, you're like, well, this is part of your budget and that's the line item and this is what I'm selling, but I had a hard time calling what we do awareness because I don't think awareness is what we're aiming at. I mean, maybe in the beginning it was, and maybe I think it came from the InfoSec community to this really amazing altruistic need to tell other people what we know, right? Everybody in this room knows what we're up against. And we want to share that information with other people. And I think that's the beginning of it. So it's like, let me tell you about malware, let me teach you how to protect your computer, and this stuff is really important. But the trick is that making someone aware through just disseminating information doesn't necessarily make them care. And that's the next level. And that's where we're trying to get to, saying sort of my Beyond Thunderdome moment, where I'm saying I want to get your employees to care about their cybersecurity. I want to get them to care enough to either do the right thing or ask the right people if they have a question. So how do we develop trust? How do we develop, dare I say, good feelings about cybersecurity? And sometimes I'm sort of like, in a room of network analysts, I'm like, can we talk about our feelings and how your employees feel and what they think and know about cybersecurity, about technology change, and about how policies and procedures work at your organization? And that's beyond awareness, is getting them to care and then hopefully being able to measure that.
I don't even like talking about my feelings. It must be an interesting conversation. Okay, why don't we show a short, and then I want to talk about how do you create change using your platform. This is one of my favorites. Technical difficulties.
We're being agile.
Oh, we're being agile? We're being agile, guys.
I do full screen. Tim, can you tell me, does it go if it's full screen?
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome sauce, thank you.
I was amazed you still had change out of a fiver. So, this is where you'll be sitting 110 with us. Who's your login? What's your password? And I don't know is your security question.
Well, that's what I want to find out.
I just told you, who's your login? What's your password? And I don't know is your security question.
Are you the systems admin?
Yes.
Are you also my IT department?
Yes.
And you don't know the login?
Of course I do.
Well then, who's the login?
Yes.
No, I mean the fellow's name.
Who?
But the login for this computer.
Who?
But the person that sits in this chair.
Who?
The person that is in the queue.
Who's the login?
What are you asking me for?
That's the man's names.
Whose name?
Yes.
Well, go ahead and tell me.
That's it.
That's who?
Yes. HR, we got another runner.
so we're going beyond awareness. We're creating change. How does this impact an organization? How do you take what we just saw, the awesome parody of Who's On First, and make this applicable? What's that journey look like?
So I think there's a couple things that we have found that are, I consider to be linchpins. Like they're sort of just touch point moments, and I think there's 3 ways we could summarize it. First is culture and understanding what you have, because you don't have a cybersecurity culture. You have an organizational culture, and you can influence it towards cybersecurity, and you can use the good parts and the values, and by understanding where the weaknesses are, you can start to shore them up through other ways of adjusting, but it's not something that you're imposing on people. So that's cultural change. I think InfoSec as an industry is just starting on that journey about bringing in, organizational anthropologists, which is, by the way, one of the founding members of my company, right? So we did start from a different place. I think the second thing is about agile. And I always laugh because everyone's like, you can't do agile in security. I was like, well, you can do agile in cyber awareness, right? Because how important is it, Kate, to like rapid release? Because we've been talking about that quite a bit, which is how do we get all this information distilled down into these little nuggets of top tips, tricks, things. How do I deliver it to the right people at the right time, whether that's a nudge or just an information bite? Because a lot of them are affected in their personal lives by things that are happening out in the world. So part of our mission is to get that content out, or make that content in a super fast way so that we can deliver it to our customers and they can get it into the right hands of the employees so that their employees actually know what's going on.
So talk to me about that, because you talked at the beginning about LMS and the learning platforms and how we all got really excited when you could quickly and rapidly deploy learning, but it's really dry, it's really hard, and it's kind of, So walk me through how a company would leverage and use Cybermaniacs. What does that look like? What are the outcomes, and how do they utilize your organization in a different manner? What makes you so different?
I think we've got a couple of different ways that we approach and look at not just creating content, but delivering content so that employees will absorb it, engage with it, and it actually sticks. So part of it is absolutely the creative factor. And the puppets are only about 10% of what we do. I like to show them because they're funny. I say we're 10% fuzzy. But there's actually a lot more behind the curtain of social media, pop culture mashups, tons of different approaches, some human stuff, animation, interactives, basically any digital medium that we can use to actually engage with your audience. We've got the whole bag of universe tricks in the back. But I think what we're trying to do is to say, and this is a hard conversation, just to be fully transparent, this is a conversation because, as you guys well know, when you're trying to implement either new technology or a new way of delivering something into what an enterprise has as an established technology stack, there's always going to be friction, which is, I'm sorry, we need you to put our stuff on an LMS. And my answer is, I'm really sorry, but I can't keep it a la minute, which is critical to cybersecurity education if you want to buy a phishing video and play it for the next 4 years. Which is the conversations we had in the beginning, which is like large financial institutions are like, we just like to buy one training video and license it for 4 years. And I was like, I really need the money as a startup, but that's not really gonna achieve the aims you think it's going to, right? And so that was a hard thing for me, just being like, I can't believe I'm turning down business, what am I thinking? But it really, I knew it wasn't gonna solve the problem. And so I think what we're looking at is new ways of delivering micro content. There are ways to engage in continuous learning. We're focused on content and micro learning and providing a way through the content for different types of learners and different types of personalities. And we actually do more autonomous learning than we do structured. And I think that's the biggest change that we found. So we did like a long time in stealth and a long time making sure that the notes we were hitting, like a band playing together, were the right ones so that when we came out, we actually addressed the need in the market. And it was exhausting, but really good. And we were lucky to find some really people who believed in us and some CISOs who were like, this is crazy, but I see where you're going with it, and let's test it out. Let's have some trials. And so that's what allowed us to learn fast.
So let's talk about that test out and how they're learning, because I just did some research with 451 Research, and one of the things that really alarmed me was it's just about to be published that this past year, accidental breach and insider theft, so not the bad guys coming in from the outside, but things that were either accidental or that were done by an employee on the inside, are now greater than the external. So it's coming out that 55% of all breaches or cyber accidents, however you want to put it, but any type of thing like that, is now greater than the external. So when you look at it in that perspective, cyber education, understanding what you should be doing as an employee, making it part of the culture, is becoming more and more critical. But it's hard to measure. And so, putting on my hat as a board member, one of the things that I'm always looking at when we're looking at risk registers with the company I'm on board of is, how do you actually measure success? So if I were looking and evaluating Cybermaniacs, how would you address my question of what does success look like and how are we measuring it?
So it's interesting. I think that was one of the things that caught our attention, and we really had to noodle on in the beginning, because having been in employee change programs, having had to roll out SharePoint and train people, and working with large organizations and stuff in the past, I've always seen where the I guess static 10-question quiz that's embedded into a compliance slide deck doesn't actually teach you very much, do you know? And I understand why auditors need it, and I understand the tick the box, and I think all that's great. So that's table stakes, and that's built into the program, because we have to have it, right? But I think what we looked at was next, which was, well, if I want to change your humans, you have to know who your humans are. And if you want to know which humans are doing the dodgy things, there's many different things you can look at to give you an answer to that. So I don't think the measures we do, and we have a lot, and I'll talk about in a sec, is the only measure you need to do around your humans. But if you're only looking at keystrokes and packet level data, that doesn't answer why your humans are having the problem. And it could be design, but it also could be the way that they feel, think, or act around technology. So what are their habits? What are their beliefs about technology? What is their risk appetite? You might have different teams that have it. I mean, we all know tech teams that like to develop new things, right? The Facebook method of, what is it, go fast and break shit. But then, stuff. And then, but there's the thing.
You're allowed to say shit in this conference.
But that's the thing. So I think there's one. So when we looked at it, we said, well, what's a couple of different angles we can look at? So we started with, we have to know what they know. So we have to start being able to measure at a larger level, what's their level of general cyber digital know-how? And then what are they aware of? What's their level of currency? So that's sort of the beginning that we looked at. But then we started to bake in a lot of measurements, either through an assessment feature or in the platform itself, kind of like Hansel and Gretel, little breadcrumb trail, is I call them my feels. And that's sentiment and perception. And we look at that along a number of different vectors, and we built this with a marketing scientist. So we took the best of Amazon sales and how they, get you to buy that extra widget at the end of the shopping cart, and we baked it into, why are your humans afraid of technology? How likely do they think they will be a victim of cybercrime? Because we all know that some of those perceptions are the ones that stop people taking responsibility for securing themselves and securing the company, right? This is IT's job, right? Or I have nothing hackers would want. So how do we start breaking down those perceptions if we don't know who has them? And the third thing we look at is we look at organizational culture along like 4 different dimensions, including a proprietary model we put together called tribes. Because we think that we have different groups within your organization that have different digital habits. And it doesn't matter what function they're in, right? This is just about how they think and feel and act with technology, and how you will communicate your policies and then how you remediate them has to be based on their values. And so that's the kind of granular level data we're digging into. And the thing that's been exciting is the companies that have, helped us build this and put it together, the results have been super surprising, because when you talk to people in a way that they like, and you're reasonable with them, and you can strike the right emotional tone, you will get that personal change 10 times faster than a directive from the governance board.
Okay, so every time I have this conversation with you, the question
too
you're about to
excited.
ask, you get really excited,
It's so exciting.
and then you go over my head on some of the data points. So before we do that, I want to talk about, and I want to dig more into, not the creativity side, but the data that you're analyzing.
Yeah.
And I know that you have been doing a lot of research about what you should be measuring from a cyber education point of view. And also, some of the research you've been doing has some pretty surprising results. But I've noticed that a lot of people have walked in recently. I'm wondering if we have one more short we could play just to give them a taste. Do you have another one?
Yes, I can talk and search at the same time.
Okay, why don't you start talk and search at the same time?
So-
Does anyone want to see another one? Aren't they fun? They're so fun. Isn't Nick? Do you guys understand why I got so excited when I met her at London? Yeah, this is a totally different type of company.
We'll do another one. Unfortunately, still passwords, but this one's fun. This is one.
Okay.
And this is not puppets. This is just a different style. And it's a super short, but this is one of the social media style nudges that we do.
Awesome.
So
So tell me about this research.
So the research is fun.
And don't be super excited.
I am super excited.
It's so funny.
I can't help it. I'm super excited. So some of the things that we've been picking apart, because as you know, the human factors in an organization and the people who make up your workforce, it's a real Gordian knot. And as we're kind of pulling these threads apart, we've been trying to figure out the motivations, the behaviors, and how all these things work. So one of the questions that we had, especially with this huge shift to remote working that happened over the last year, was, are the people that we assume follow the directives and can absorb this new way of working the same people we think? Like, how are we keeping remote workers safe, and are they doing the things we think they're doing? Because the more conversations we have with CISOs and other people in the industry, the more we've been like, this is a whole level of, we have no idea what's going on in people's houses. Like, is the setup correct? Or how do we guide them? Or how much kit do we give them? Or how often do we give them directives? And do they have Alexas and Siris and listening devices in the same room they're working, and what are the HR implications of recording Zoom calls and storing them on your local drive as opposed to in the same corporate cloud? So there's just, there's like a plethora of questions around this stuff. And so we said, like, well, let's see what we can start with. And some of our initial research, which has been super eye-opening, is that we have found that there's direct correlations that the people that follow the rules in your office, who you would say are your champions, your policy adherents, the people you don't have to worry about repeat clicking all the time. It's sort of like you roll something out and they're mostly on board. You're like, thank you for that, right? They're actually not the people who are more secure in a remote work environment. Because what they want is the safety, security, and structure of the office. And when they're in a remote location and they're in their home, It's actually the people who usually play a little fast and loose with the rules who are statistically showing up as being able to better adapt to the new working environment and better run with new regulations. And so we're starting to pull that out now, not just on behaviors, but on individual types of cyber risk we see in remote working versus the office. But that was a big eye-opener for us because we assumed, we're like, it's gonna show. And then the data came out, we looked at the correlation, we were like, but that's not the people we thought it was. And that's just one example of some of the interesting things we're finding. So how you go about communicating with them next and how we do that dynamically and at speed is what we're working on. Which is, okay, you've got these kind of people, what are the right messages that I can send to them and not make it a manual process, but make it more automated and dynamic.
So you're telling me, in addition to the work from home technology shifts and transformation, we also need to transform how we're educating our employees about security, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, this is, if you go have a good chat with an innovative HR executive, they'll tell you that so much of the HR learning and development space is shifting. I used to make fun of HR until I had to jump in the trenches and help them out, and I think that they've got a yeoman's service to do. But sometimes in many organizations, it can be challenging to work together, right? And I think that this is one of the places where having a great relationship with your HR team and really digging in and understanding what technologies are available and getting beyond the LMS, as they say, it's super important because an LMS can deliver learning packages of 5 to 20 minutes, but they're not dynamic. That's not what they were built for. So there are ways to create streamed content, there are ways to create dynamic content, there are ways to personalize and segment for audiences, and I think that's the next frontier. So that is where we're going, where it's, we are focusing more on how do we create a personal journey of change for each employee, and how do we find out their unique desires. Because I will tell you that the data that we're seeing from the platform now is people are much more motivated to learn about keeping their family secure than they are the company. But if I can teach them the same lessons and they can absorb it into their person, then I'm creating happy cybersecure people who will also keep your company safe.
Okay, so let's pretend I'm a CISO and I want to start making these changes. But this is a big shift in awareness. And we're used to the one-size-fits-all training hat. Where we just go in, and to your point, we deploy it with LMS. I can't say that, LMS. And it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. How do they fight against it? How do they start working with you? What does your normal, typical engagement look like when you start working with company? And what companies have you been working with? What are the size and what have you looked at?
So we've got, we have two ways that we've started to work with organizations. One is on a more content basis, because they want to dip their toes in the water and they realize that we've got a creative secret sauce and something that's different. And so usually we start with that. And we say, look, let's deliver some videos, let's deliver some memes, let's give you some nudges, let's engage with your workforce. And once you see the feedback on how much they love this content, then we dive in a bit more. But the other place that we usually start is with an assessment on the people. And so we come in and do a comprehensive look at your population, and we use our assessment framework to come in and say, here are your people. Really, who are your people?
Why is that important?
Well, how are you, this is the thing, is if you're going to design a training program, we're assuming that everyone in the, it's the law of averages versus the law of the mean. And we kind of assume everyone knows this much about passwords, let's start here. But you might have 20% of your population that doesn't lock their phone, right? And we are able to help you find how much of these populations exist, what they think, feel, and believe about cybersecurity, and how they fit into your culture. And we think that all those things come together. So that I call it a map. It's a culture map. It's a sort of a report on your humans, what they know and what they feel, but then also where your tribes are. And from that map, you create a strategy. So if anyone understands military history, strategy is what gets you from A to B. I can tell you what you have at A, I can help you design what you want at B, and then I can show you the internal and external factors you have that might change the way that you choose to communicate with, train, update, or move your army from one place to the next. And that's the challenge. Culture isn't a score. It's not an 8 out of 10. And if there's a vendor out there, and I'm not disparaging any other vendors in my space, because I think there's a lot of people doing incredible work in the space. The industry's really come along the last couple of years. It's super exciting to be here. But if someone's gonna tell you that you as an InfoSec team can fill out a 2-page form and they're gonna give you an 8 out of 10, that was probably a waste of 20 minutes of your time. It's not gonna tell you anything. You have to actually know who your people are.
So I want to change gears for a minute. We've worked together now for almost 2 years.
My God.
I know, it's crazy. And you were in stealth for a long time. So let me explain. So Kate is an early stage startup. Cybermaniacs is an early stage startup. You are looking to secure your seed funding, which is very exciting. You have some customers right now, which is even more exciting for a company coming out of stealth. It's fun, some decent name customers, yeah. Why stealth so long? What took you, I mean, so this is obviously a passion and there's a lot to what you created here. Why were you in stealth so long?
So one of the things we knew from the beginning was that we weren't approaching this from an inside but an outside perspective. So none of the founding team has a background in cybersecurity awareness. We have backgrounds in digital transformation. I have an organizational anthropologist, a marketing scientist, an HR professional, and some cyber researchers. And then I brought a crazy crew of creative talent to the table. And actually one of my humble brags is that early on in the process, once we decided that puppets were one of the mechanisms we were going to use because of their ability to tell a story, because they're abstract, because it's illegal, I can do things to them that's illegal to do to humans. Well, it was.
She really does.
It's kind of fun. I can hit them on the head with frying pans. It's fantastic, and people have such an emotional connection to them. So that's one of the reasons, and I can wax rhapsodic for that. But why we chose them as a creative mechanism to help get these messages across, because people don't see puppets as scary. So it helps us, create that takeaway, that FUD that we were against. So when we looked at this space as a bunch of outsiders, we really started to say, well, if we could design anything that didn't have to be L&D, that didn't have to be SCORM files, right? That didn't have to be the kind of corporate training we had all taken in our careers. We were lucky enough to have the time and the energy to investigate a number of approaches and creative styles. And I'm very much about customer-driven design, and I'm a certified Agile PO. And I really wanted the empirical proof that what we were doing, even though it was creative, had the statistics and the data behind it that what we were doing would actually stick. Because I didn't want it to seem like, oh, they're the puppet people and they just throw crazy videos out there. I was like, actually, we have a behavioral psychologist and marketing people who pick the words, and we have science and symbols that we use in all the videos, so there's like a layering that happens beyond it. And so creating that approach took a long time, creating the framework took a long time, and then we realized we could measure it, and that took some time. And then we realized we could put it on a platform, and that's what we're building now, is that whole delivery mechanism. And now we've realized that we can deliver the platform in a number of different ways, and we can stream things, and we can API it, and we can, so now it's sort of like, and that's where the universe has opened up, because I think at the end of the day, there's some big things we want to do, and I was very lucky to have the time to be able to figure it out before we went to market, rather than the other way around.
It's interesting to me because, sitting as your advisor, I look at and I understand the companies that are working with you. And you have a lot of it's resonated very well from an IoT perspective. Looking at how you can use the platform to do better cyber awareness around IoT. It's resonated with healthcare. It's resonated with financial services. A little stodgy.
They don't want to admit it, but they love it.
They love it. Yeah, it's kind of like it's the secret that they don't want to tell. What do you think your sweet spot's going to be as you come in and grow your base of customers right now? Has it surprised you that it's resonated so well? It's not
a surprise, I guess, in a certain regard. I think because we did test so much and took some care with that.
Well, and I saw it at White Hat. Like I could not believe the reaction. It was incredible.
So one of the things that we started to talk about early on was how do we find our target customers. So now we're into like sales and vendor speak, but a lot of times you'll see a vendor be like, well, we sell to enterprises that have over this budget or this many employees, and they have to be in these 3 industries. And so that was the question I got a lot of times when talking to the business and the funding side of the equation. And I said, well, we don't actually have that kind of model because I technically can deliver this to anybody who uses a computer for work. So when they say, well, how big is your market? I'm like, well, how many companies use computers and have people? That's the market. And so what we started to look at was who would our early adopters be, who we get the best traction was, and what we actually, found was the something around the brand and the culture. So the companies that have less hierarchical culture, who have a more people-focused culture, who maybe have a fun-oriented brand, those who have more mature HR programs, those are a little bit more innovative and agile in their cultures, were easier to have those conversations with right off the bat because they wanted to try something new and they were interested in delivering things that actually delivered personal value to their people as well as corporate value. So that was sort of a lock-in in terms of vision and mission. But then the other thing we noticed was there's a huge maturity difference in awareness programs and how they're run at organizations big and small. And so we were actually started to target companies that were higher on that scale where there was board level understanding of cybersecurity awareness and maturity, that the CISOs were willing to have the conversations around culture and had already been asking the questions, how do I do this, for like years. So when we came to them, we said, well, these are the ways we think you can do it, and here's the models. That's where it really locked in. So it's the people focus and enough cybersecurity maturity for our early adopters that those weren't hard conversations, those were easy conversations to have because they knew that was their problem.
So, you are an atypical seed at this point in an early company. You have a fairly established base of customers. You have a very solid vision. You've got a refined product. I'm going to say that again, a refined product. That's been fun.
We're so refined.
Where do you want to go? What's your vision for the company? Like, if the sky was the limit, what do you want to accomplish?
So, what I love is that Kate asked me this question about 2 years ago, right after she met me. And I think that we were, in true founder format, so focused on building. I was like, oh my God, we're going to build it, we're going to deliver it, we're going to build it, we're going to deliver it, we're going to build it, we're going to talk to everybody. And Kate's like, slow down. She's like, where do you want to go? And I was like, oh, well, it'd be nice to build a big company and to help a lot of other companies keep their people secure and I want to make people happy. And she's like, that's not big enough. She's like, what do you really want to build? And I was like, oh God. And I think I had to, and I love that you challenged me on it because we had to kind of, I sat down with my strategy team and I had a couple of big cocktails. And I said, I hope it's not too much hubris, but what we really want to do is create millions of happy cyber-safe humans. And I think there's a lot of different ways we can do that. And I think we've built a brand from the beginning that was about helping people and about engaging with them emotionally and helping them personally change their habits so they can keep themselves and their families and the things that they care about safe, and by extension, your companies. And I think that that's the best, fastest way to get there because we do need to get there fast. I mean, every statistic out there about the human factor, human firewall, human errors, humans are bad. I just look at it and go, yeah, but we never really got on their level. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to do it really at scale because I think there's a way to get people to not be afraid of taking charge of their digital future. And I think it's never been more important to do that. So once then I realized that that was our mission, like the fire was lit, because I was like, oh no, now I've thought it. Now we actually have to do it. It's really hard.
So can I tell the story? Okay, I'll tell the story. So, met Kate at White Hat. We became fast friends. And she called me about 3 months later, and she had a business opportunity that she wanted to look over with me. And we did. We had, I'm going to say it again, we had an oh shit moment. Because her vision of what she thought potentially the company could be, and then what was on the table, opened, I think, the eyes of where we could take this from a potential standpoint. And the thing I love as an advisor is very rarely in an early stage like this, do you get an opportunity to change and cultivate a major change in the marketplace? So when we did the analysis, I love Misfits, and she's one of my favorite Misfits, because she didn't fit in any of the boxes. You know, there was not another cyber education company approaching this wicked business problem and cultural problem, really. It's not a business problem, it's a cultural problem in the same way. So how do you look at a cap table? Where should we think about funding? Who's done something like this before? There was nothing to measure her against. And no, don't be sorry. It's the best problem ever for an advisor, because here's why.
My parents could admit this has been sort of a track record.
It's all good. It's all good. It was interesting because every company we put her in front of all had the same reaction. We need this. It's a question of how do we align in a different way. And so it's fun to see kind of a revolutionary change happening from a grassroots up. She's pretty awesome that way. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left. Who'd like to see one more video and then we'll ask some questions? All right, go for it. Play puppets. I like the puppets.
What am I playing?
Whatever puppet we play on.
Puppets, more puppets? Okay, more puppets.
Isn't it fun? Yes.
You guys want a song? We actually have a composer on staff, and in terms of our creative talent, we have all in-house. We write our own songs, we write our own music, we do our animation. Our lead puppeteer and main creative advisor is actually also, I want to go big, hold on a second.
Go big or go home.
I want to do the player, that's what I'm looking for. That's why full screen. Thank you. Save. That's what I wanted. So actually our lead puppeteer, and so one of the people that we started working with really early to make sure that it clicked creatively and emotionally, we kind of went down the rabbit hole, because I was like, I'm building a cyber education company, but I'm spending half of my time with puppets. So I was like, what are we doing?
I want her job most days.
Way too much fun. Come work with us. And we tapped into the puppeteering community, which is really interesting because there's so many parallels to the cybersecurity community. It's so tight-knit. There's so many amazing craftspeople that work in the space. And so what
we're all a little crazy. It's all
we're all a little crazy. And we thought in the beginning, we're like, you know what? We'll just throw some socks on people's hands and it'll be fine. Like, we can totally train this way. But when we started to pilot and test it out, the reactions we got to different types of videos, and I will someday play the original videos we created because they suck so bad. But what we found was that the level of craft is actually critically important, and so we wound our way through this community, and we ended up finding Brian Herring and Sean and some of these other people that work with us on a regular basis. And Brian is actually one of the top tier puppeteers in the world. He is the lead puppeteer for BB-8 in all the Star Wars films. So that's an animatronic puppet. He runs through the desert with a remote control device, and I have pictures. It's awesome.
It's been an amazing education about puppeteering, let me tell you.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in a career as a puppet wrangler, I can explain what that is. But here, let's play a song, because I think also our composer is amazing. He does great stuff.
Who's that behind me, peering at my screen, over my shoulder, thinking they're unseen? At first it was weird, and then it was rude, but I'm in the know, and now baby I'm approved. On the train, on the plane, coffee bar, wherever you are, I'm there. Leaving your screen in a position upright, your quarterly sales report in everybody's sight. Big pitch presentation sitting out in the open, or personal customer information to be broken. Who's that guy getting too air on the plane, the road behind? I'm sure he's a nice guy, but hey dude, do you mind? On the train, on the plane, coffee bar, wherever you are, Praying eyes are always around for sure. So keep what's on your screen safe and secure. A little piece of film is all you need for your screen. To hide it, to shield it like information sunscreen. Shoulder sofa on the plane. Shoulder sofa, coffee bar. Shoulder sofa, wherever you are. Shoulder sofa on the train, maybe it's somewhere else. On the plane, could be anywhere. Coffee bar, wherever you are. On the train, on the plane, coffee bar.
Okay, what questions do you have for Kate? Mike.
So I had one with 40 employees. I'm working now with 5 employees. Scalability drives me crazy because I'm on company boards and everyone talks about companies that have Fortune 500 out of them because that's who can afford this stuff. But if you look at the marketplace of people, that's not most companies. So this has been a huge frustration gap that I don't think solved out. How do you solve that properly?
So that's a question near and dear to my heart. I come from a long line of small business owners in my family, right? And I think when I get in a conversation with my brother and my dad, both own their own companies, they've got about 45 employees, they've got 35 million in turnover. These are the questions that I kept on peppering them with, which is, you don't even have an IT guy. Like, everything is outsourced, so what are you gonna do? And I think that's a challenge we had. So we created 2 different versions of the product. So there's 2 versions of the platform. One is for the enterprise customers who are gonna wanna tweak and, nudge and adjust curriculum paths and whatnot. But then there's one that we kind of did as a DIY, like a set it and forget it. So basically the training runs on a cadence over the course of a year plus. And you just automatically delivers training to your employees and we kind of deliver the reports back to you. And so that's the way that we're trying to address the SME market, is to make it easy for them to deliver world-class awareness that is personal, that is fun, that is interesting, without them having to hire an LMS administrator to put courses into their people's files. Because that's the big thing we heard from that market, is do it for me, give me best in class, make it affordable, but I don't have time on my staff to move courses around and assign things and to check if everyone's doing their training. So we do that automatically.
The invisible majority. That drives me insane. Because every regulator, every law firm, every IPP, it's all big, and that's just not.
Well, I think it's like, there hasn't been a lot of recent research on this, so I'm actually kind of curious to see where the numbers have changed in the last 2 years because of remote working, etc. But as of 2019, it was like 50 to 60% of large enterprises had a clearly defined cyber awareness program, but it was less than 25% of the SME market that actually delivers this. The majority of the US economy is SME, right? So it's a real disservice, and the thing we found is that the owners of those businesses want this kind of training because it helps their employees, and that's what they care about. So most small employers really want to build a business, but they want to take care of their people. That is a passion for them. And so by delivering personal learning, because the first, I'm not going to go too far because kids like stop talking, but the first sort of, when we put together our competency model, I said, why are we starting with phishing? Phishing is the worst thing to start with. It's complicated, there's lots of rhyming things that people think, vishing, smishing, like you're gonna talk to my mom that way, what? Vishing, smishing, sounds like Dr. Seuss. And how much fish could a swish dish?
Focus.
But I think what we did is, we said, how do we pull people in with their hearts and their minds? And we have to give them the why. So we talked to them first about cybercrime in general. We talked to them about personal cybercrime and identity theft more than we do about corporate. And then we talked to them about passwords, and then we have 5 micro courses that are just on personal learning. It has nothing to do, we don't even say company. We just say, hey, let's talk about your inbox. Hey, let's talk about your social media. Let's talk about your phone. And it's just sort of the new rules of the road. It's the new defensive driving course. But we go to phishing, social engineering, and all the technical stuff later, but that's actually what the small business owners like the most because they felt like it was a benefit. And what we're coming out with now is protect your family, protect your home, and all that stuff is baked in.
Okay, I think we've run out of time. One more question.
So how do we invest?
Come talk to
Come
Kate
talk to me later.
afterwards. Awesome. Thank you very much for your time, guys.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.